The broadcast is now starting. All attendees are in listen-only mode.
The Collision Industry Electronic Commerce Association, or CIECA, develops and promotes electronic communication standards that allow the collision industry to be more efficient. We also provide webinars like this one to help educate both members and non-members. CIECA is a nonprofit organization dedicated to developing standards for the exchange of information across the collision industry. As such, we have a vested interest in understanding what changes are coming so we can be prepared to address them as they arise. While data is our business, data does not exist in a vacuum. Every change to CIECA standard is driven by some type of business, regulatory, or environmental challenge that gives rise to the need for new or different information. For this reason, we're going to explore the broader impacts of the electric vehicle and the increasing growth of autonomous features. What challenges will the industry face preparing for these changes? How will they impact various segments of the industry? And how might these changes impact the way we communicate across the industry? Bottom line, is the industry ready? As we start our webinar, I want to remind you that there is no verbal communication between the participants and the presenter. If you have questions, please type them in the question panel on the webinar screen, and we will answer as many questions as possible at the end of the presentation. We're pleased to have with us today representatives from 3 different segments of the industry. John Eck, Collision Manager from General Motors, Chris Evans, Claims Consultant from State Farm, and Pete Tagliapietra, Business Development Leader for NuGen IT. Thank you, gentlemen, for joining us today. We're going to start off with John Eck. So, John, we'll start with you. John, let's start with a broad view of the EV as it affects the future. What is the future for EVs at GM? And will EVs become a major part of the GM lineup?
Well, first of all, to Paul and to the rest of the CIECA organization, thank you for having me on this webinar. I really appreciate the opportunity to engage and interact with the industry stakeholders and appreciate what CIECA is doing relative to furthering this discussion. So yeah, EVs and General Motors, we have made a massive commitment to an all-electric future. In recent months, the public has seen 3 vehicles announced and launched and viewed. The GMC Hummer Super Truck, the Cadillac Lyriq, and just even a couple weeks ago at the CES show, the virtual show that they did, we launched and announced the Cadillac Celestiq, all electric vehicles. And we have massive, aggressive plans for BEV vehicles, as we refer to them, battery electric. We're expected to launch nearly 30 models in the next 4 years. And ultimately, GM is targeting an all-electric future as part of our 0-0-0 initiative, that being 0 emissions, 0 crashes, and 0 congestion. So our plans are an all-electric future, and we're moving very aggressively in that front.
Thanks, John. What business challenges or opportunities does the EV create for the manufacturer?
Well, they have both. They present a lot of challenges, but there are also, we believe, a lot of opportunities. From the challenges side, there is going to be the technician knowledge level and being able to handle the EV. Clearly, in today's market, there is a portion of the industry, the technicians that are handling EV. However, that plays into the timing. As that car park grows, the 1 or 2% of the marketplace that might be handling the EV population today is going to need to grow. So our breadth and depth of EV is going to need to grow in the industry. So we have the challenge of that, as well as different OEMs are pursuing different techniques in how to launch and how to deploy and what their BEV strategy will look like. On the opportunity side, the opportunity is maybe to attract new technicians and a new different type of technician as we move into EVs and maybe attracting some of that younger generation that wants to be involved in these very specialized and very unique vehicles. There's an opportunity for diversification across the industry. No longer is a body shop or a collision repair limited to a traditional type vehicle. There's a diversification in electrification or in the ADAS requirements for calibration that they're going to have an opportunity to diversify into. There's an opportunity for us in the industry, these stakeholders, the leadership there, to engage and collaborate across all stakeholders, the OEMs, the insurers, the repairers, and the tech companies, an opportunity to come together to help the technicians in these repair processes. We're chasing customer satisfaction. And I think we have an opportunity at this point to really disrupt or change or be ready for the changes that is going to happen to the normal status quo that we maybe have experienced. And I think finally there's an opportunity in the commercial and fleet. I think at the CES show, we've seen major announcements by the Amazons, the FedExes, DHL, Uber, all making large commitments to increase their personal EV fleets. And I think the repairers in the EV space will have an opportunity to maybe expand into some of this business as well.
Great, thanks, John. How will the growth of EV impact the collision industry?
Well, certainly we've seen it happen over the last couple of years with more ADAS systems on the vehicles and more technology. That has propelled actually fewer or lower frequency that we've seen in the market. But at the same time, we're dealing with the higher technology costs of that. So severity issues are things that we're watching and we're trying to monitor and assist in. It means that the technicians have to be more trained on these EV repairs. At GM, when we look at our new platform and the batteries are being produced, we're looking at motors in the front and motors in the back. So the build of the vehicle is going to be different. From a structural standpoint, the impact of the collision industry from our standpoint may not be as severe. Working with our engineer teams, we're learning that structurally, these vehicles aren't that dissimilar to what they see, other than obviously the battery cages and the structural build. But as long as technicians are following our repair procedures and utilizing the OEM instructions and following the safety protocols relative to electrification, those repairs should be able to handle as they have been from a structural standpoint. So a lot of impact, and then some impact is probably won't be as noticeable as we've seen with the introduction of maybe some brand new substrates that we've seen over the years.
So to that point, do we have the tools, the methods, and the data necessary to effectively manage the repair of the EV of the future?
Yeah, I think we work with our engineers very closely, and from a GM perspective, with what we're advising the marketplace or bringing to the marketplace of how to be prepared, we're in pretty good shape from a structural repair. Structural fixture benches, 3D measuring, those types of tool and equipment investments that will continue to be made to bring repairers up to par will help. Obviously, there will be things that come out from our standpoint or maybe from another OEM standpoint that they need to engage in. But from our standpoint, the process change is really around battery handling and how they're going to handle the battery and that aspect, as each OEM will have their own process. But as part of our ship to commerce guidelines and requirements, the repair procedures are available when the vehicle is shipped to commerce and when it's released. So the repair procedures and the ability to fix that battery are going to be there, and we'll be able to help the shops along the way as well.
Great, thanks. As autonomous features become more common, does this change the vehicle repair process?
Well, I mean, we've been talking about this for a few years, and the OEMs make the repair procedures available to the marketplace. And if repairers and the technicians follow the respective OEM procedures without exception and understanding, regardless of severity, that it's important to follow these procedures for the ADAS, they should be okay. I think that the repair process, those that have a blueprinting process and have integrated repair solution for finding these procedures to help them, they'll be okay. And I think the important thing is following the safety tips, especially when we start talking battery electrification, making sure that they're following the OEM safety tips on disengaging the battery and taking the power down so that you can work on the vehicle.
Well, that's a good segue then. So the rise of repair standards has had a profound impact on the industry. Do you anticipate other changes in the way OEMs communicate and interact with the collision industry?
Yes, I do. In fact, at our OEM roundtable, we continue to talk about these needs and the repair needs to be able to access this information and make it easier to get a hold of. You're seeing better and deeper integration of the repair content in the workflow process, right? You got to bury that content, you got to build it into the workflow process. So we've done that in a number of ways, right? GM service information has been integrated into the Mitchell Cloud estimating system. All data using the Advantage product developed by NuGen Technologies has helped repairers using the EMS BMS file format align repair procedures better to an estimate so that they have that information. It saves them time. And I think others are doing, with their respective technology, finding solutions to help the dealer workflow and integrate that repair procedure or the OEM repair procedures into that process. From a scanning and calibration standpoint, I think you're seeing OEs, I know it's true at GM, working to increase the number of aftermarket scan tools, the hardware, as from our standpoint, that we're kind of hardware agnostic as long as they're using the OEM software, or what we would call GM GDS2 software, the OEM software for calibration and scanning. And I think you're seeing OEMs finding ways to do that. I know GM, that's one of my goals as I work towards helping shops use hardware, try to be hardware agnostic, but making sure that they're using the OEM software to do the calibrations. So those are a couple ways I think you're seeing the OEM step up and try to make the work process better.
Yeah, so along those same lines, then, with OEs taking a more active role in the collision process, do you see this creating a need for new relationships with insurance companies and the collision repair shops?
Emphatically, absolutely. Over the years, we've been advocating an improved collaboration between the insurance carriers and repairers to fix some of the challenges that we all face. I'll give an example using State Farm. I know Chris Evans is on this call. We've been working with him for years, and GM and State Farm have a very good working relationship. And lately, we've engaged our teams with their teams to overlay networks and share some of our network opportunities to making sure that our networks and their network might find a commonality. We look forward to future opportunities and collaboration with carriers to evolve this dialogue, as we have, I believe, many common goals. We have goals of a high CSI, a low cycle time, safe and proper repairs, customer loyalty, things like that. I think we have a lot of common touch points, and we're going to really need to work closer together in the coming months. We don't have years to fix this. We have months to try to get the market in a better shape and collaborate more. OEMs know the vehicle better than anyone. We're the ones that build, design, engineer it, manufacture it. And we here at GM, we're ready and we want to work with the industry, the carriers, the repairers, tool companies, all those stakeholders that play a part in that proper repair to help facilitate what needs to happen so that we can hit those same common metrics and things like that. And I invite any carrier to that conversation. And I know, like I said, Chris and I have had a great relationship, and collaboration between our two organizations is great.
Very good. So, John, just kind of wrapping it up then, I guess I'll ask you, what do you see as the single most impactful change the EV will bring to the industry?
Well, I think, there is a growing complexity of the repair and the need to follow the OEM repair procedures. Maybe even more so than before with traditional vehicles. each OEM is going to have different processes. So building in that safe and proper blueprinting process where you're pulling in the OEM specific information to do the repair is key. Structural componentry to the repair, the challenges will be more probably around the battery cage itself relative to tray damage or what have you. You know, there is the issue of high voltage. So everything around BEV is going to be around safety and the proper handling of that vehicle. And the OEMs, I believe that even in our recent roundtable board meeting last week, we discussed the need to pull this together and try to help the industry have access to those resources.
Great. Well, thank you, John. That was very informative. I appreciate you taking the time to talk with us. We're going to transition now and introduce Chris Evans. Chris is a claims consultant for P&C Claims with State Farm Insurance. So welcome, Chris.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
Well, thank you. So let's begin. Autonomous features are increasing with every new model year. What do you see as the greatest challenges to the collision ecosystem related to autonomous vehicles?
Sure. So first of all, I want to echo John's sentiments that I really appreciate the opportunity to participate here today. The timing is really, really great on this issue. You know, we're looking very carefully at this matter and how does State Farm position itself well to serve our customers well, you know, engage with business partners on moving claims forward and proper repairs and that sort of thing. So really appreciate the opportunity. So yeah, at some point, you know, there's been projections that we're going to see very soon, you know, 20 to 30% of the new cars on the road will be EV vehicles. And, you know, I would say that probably by 2030, we'll see a scaled transformation to an EV infrastructure. So it's not just about having the cars on the road, but it's about having the infrastructure capable of charging stations and those sorts of things. And then subsequently, you know, electric vehicles bring with them a lot of technology. And so the claim handling process, you know, is really ripe for taking advantage and leveraging that technology. So, you know, we see, you know, the collision ecosystem, you know, changing in those ways from a claim handling standpoint. Interesting fun fact, you all have heard of Rivian car company. They're actually right here in our backyard in Bloomington. And they took the place of Mitsubishi Motor Company's only North American plant when Mitsubishi moved their operations overseas, back overseas. Rivian occupied that space, and now they're growing tremendously. And it's fun to see what's going on there, and particularly for the economy here in Bloomington, selfishly speaking. But you know, with the dropping costs of lithium batteries dropping dramatically. Manufacturing benefits that you all may, you know, be aware of and reading about. You know, I understand it costs, you know, 30% less labor in a manufacturing process to produce an electric vehicle as opposed to a combustion engine vehicle. 50% more floor space is required to build a combustion engine vehicle. So there's so many reasons why we're going to continue to see, you know, electric vehicles, autonomous vehicles enter the ecosystem. At State Farm, we actually have seen the number of electric vehicles quadruple since 2018. So, and it's the signaling, you know, the signaling for growth is for sure there. The good news for us is our strategic resources department, who I'm very fortunate to have working with us, basically research, we call them. They have wonderful relationships with a number of the car companies and are working very closely on not only the technical matters, but on telematics and things like that. So my deep appreciation to them for that work. Some of the more interesting things we've seen from a claims standpoint. One of the major electric car companies, who I'll not name, represents a pretty good book of our business right now. And unlike most collisions where the front impact is it's the most frequently damaged part of the car, we're seeing that in this population of vehicles that the rear end impacts are the most frequently damaged areas in a repairable scenario. And it's like in the circa 20% range. So that's an interesting development. It's an interesting dynamic. You can speculate as to why that might be. Some of the autonomous features or the ADAS features, might catch a vehicle owner that's not familiar with that type of technology a little bit off guard at first, and the deceleration for, when it comes to electric vehicles, may cause some of that. I'm not speculating or pretending to be an expert on why, but those are some interesting things that I thought your audience would find interesting. We also believe that and have seen that these vehicles, many or most repairs, regardless of how severe, are requiring a recalibration of some type. And so, that's a game changer in and of itself. ADAS is one thing, but when you have a fully electric vehicle that has a lot of different sophistication and technology, the need for recalibration is going to be on the rise. And then finally, said it well, following specific technical repair procedures in the repair of these vehicles is going to be kind of a game changer, I would say. I mean, we're seeing a lot of movement, a lot of trending in the industry around following and the need to follow technical repair procedures, but this just ups the game in that regard. So finally, I'll just say that, John also mentioned that, what we're seeing is when it comes to scanning and calibration, we've seen some car companies implement security gateway modules, and that's presented a little bit of a hurdle for some repairs and create a little confusion. But I'm happy to see that car companies like GM and others are opening up those communication systems for more of a competitive landscape when it comes to things like products and tools used in the repair process. So I hope I answered your question on that one. Probably.
It's a broad question. It's a broad topic, no doubt. We're seeing a lot of change across the industry with the autonomous features and the electric vehicle both. Along that line, then, as more of the ADAS features, that data is stored in the black box, do we have the ability to use that data effectively in the collision process? And do you see a need for the standards for the exchange of vehicle data?
Yeah, I would say, CIECA's positioned very well for these developments. I do believe that the data that exists in, black boxes or event data recorders is what we call them. They've been around for quite a while. Early 90s is when we really saw, event data recorders, show up in many vehicle brands and models. And what we're seeing is third parties are popping up everywhere, and will become more relevant in the future relative to the integration of telematics, and to support everything from rating sophistication by insurers for understanding driving behaviors and braking patterns and acceleration and those sorts of things, to actual loss reporting solutions. So that communication from the vehicle is only going to increase. And when it comes to the black boxes, as you referred to it, we've been mindful for years. It's not just a matter of plugging something in and taking the information. There are federal laws that stipulate that the data retained by an event data recorder is property that's owned by the vehicle owner, or in the case of a leased vehicle, the lessee for that vehicle. And the data that's captured cannot be accessed by a person other than the owner or lessee of that motor vehicle, unless there's a court order authorizes a retrieval of that data, or the owner or the lessee signs off, in written form or electronic form, or even audio recorded consent form can be used to capture that information. So it's not just about having the data, it's about, kind of some of the challenges of introducing vehicle owners and consumers into the exchange of data and information, and how that can enable, better rating, better, claim handling, and that sort of thing.
Good. Well, so segueing from that answer then, as insurance companies rely on data to rate and price their products, is there a need for more or different data as EVs and autonomous features expand?
Yeah, so yes, the short answer is yes. And again, I think CIECAST really, this is right in your wheelhouse. State Farm has like many other insurers, they have solutions around, looking at rating and policies and driving behaviors. And our solution is called Drive Safe and Save. And one of the bigger announcements that we had recently was back in August, specifically August 27th, we announced a collaboration with Ford Motor Company, where so we're bypassing just using State Farm's proprietary solutions, but and the cars and integrating with the car itself. So Ford products, going back to or as current, I should say, Ford products as of 2020 are equipped and capable of sharing information directly with State Farm. And so that information through our Drive Safe and Safe program can be used for not only rating purposes, but also for the claim handling process, as I said. So the objective there is for us to develop an understanding of the potential capabilities and supporting processes that leverage sophistication in the claim handling process and streamline things and create more efficiencies in the overall claims process.
Okay. Well, following along that line then, what changes do you see the EV or autonomous vehicle having on the claims process?
Yeah, so I mentioned, not only does the collaboration with car companies enable us to underwrite drivers better, it also enables, at first notice of loss, the opportunity to information from the vehicle's communication system and frankly, pre-populate loss information. So where the vehicle was located, maybe conditions at the time of the loss, what happened seconds before the loss, and really, we're actually engaged in exploring this further and testing, what capabilities do we have to enable a more seamless process where, a vehicle is in a collision event, and that vehicle owner had given us consent previously when they purchased or renewed their policy with State Farm to use that information in the event of a collision. And that information then, in the event of a collision, can immediately pre-populate a loss report, giving us, multiple field inputs. And when that customer, contacts us, we've already got a lot of that information. So that's kind of a game changer. That information then can subsequently be used to, perhaps triage losses, perhaps share proper information with, the repairer that the vehicle owner selects for repairs, sharing that facts of loss and, other data elements can be very important in understanding the damage and subsequently repairing it. So those are some of the big things that come from telematics and integration with that in our claim processes.
Thank you. Obviously, we've been talking a lot about the repairable vehicle, but certainly some percentage of vehicles are not repairable. What impacts do you see the EV or the autonomous vehicle having on the total loss, and particularly as it may relate to the battery?
Yeah, so that's a good question. And, when you think about, hazardous handling of hazardous materials and that sort of thing, the battery obviously comes to mind right away. And that is a factor. I will say before I touch on that, I had shared that, I did a little bit of research prior to this call just to, equip myself for any questions or additional context. And I had mentioned that rear end impacts, seem to be pretty prevalent for these types of vehicles in a repairable scenario. But on a total loss scenario, it's actually the frontal impacts that are causing a lot of those total losses. And a lot of the technology is on the front end of the vehicle, so that's not a big surprise to most people. But so I would say that, when you think about total losses and salvage, when certain brands are totaled, are declared total losses, the OE, certain OEs place those vehicles in what we understand to be determined to be unsupported status. So think about, a supported status being, the OEM will service the vehicle, the dealers can service the vehicle, they can buy parts for the vehicle for that VIN. You can get updates over the cloud for updating software and enhancing the vehicle's capabilities and that sort of thing. When a vehicle with a certain large brand is declared a total loss, that VIN is then declared unsupported. And so you would think that would have an impact on salvage, and to some degree it does. But what we've learned at State Farm is, the salvage values are better when the vehicle is operable. And I don't pretend to be a technical expert, but there's a component called a pyrotechnic fuse, I guess, that blows, if you will, in the event like of an SRS deployment or something like that, and that renders the vehicle inoperable. Well, if the battery is still safe and undamaged, and the vehicle itself is operable yet maybe a total loss, think about some of these vehicles aging at some point. You can buy one of those fuses, re-engage the vehicle. It's not going to be supported, so it's not going to be something that you can rebuild, but it is something that it helps out with salvage values. But as far as batteries go, there's still a lot to learn on our end in that regard. State Farm is on record for, if you go to our website, we've taken some steps to become and integrate with other vendors and folks in the industry to really be conscious of the environmental sustainability and activities that we engage in, that the folks we do business with engage in. So that's a developing matter for us, and we're very mindful of it. But again, there's just still a lot to learn there. So.
Thanks, Chris. Yeah, I realize that's a rapidly evolving area, and I think we're all going to learn a lot in the next few years. Well, thank you very much for taking time to meet with us. We're going to transition now to Pete Tagliapietra. Pete is the Business Development Manager for NuGen IT, which is an OEC company. Welcome, Pete. Thanks for joining us.
Thanks for having me, Paul. It's a pleasure to be here and participate in this webinar.
Great. So, Pete, from your view, what trends do you see in terms of OE's involvement in the repair industry?
The rise of certification networks and the refinement to be able to interact more with the repair networks that the OEs are establishing to closely monitor how those vehicles are being repaired. We believe at OEC is very important to the OEs. We also believe that the relative importance of utilizing the OE procedures as they're written is absolutely critical to the correct repair of EVs. It's changing the paradigm really on the importance of OE repair information and how it's utilized and how that information is actually delivered. Obviously, it goes without saying that the OEs are very, very interested in protecting their brand, which they certainly have every right to do. And of course, we all talk about servicing the customer, and most of us realize that when an accident occurs, how the vehicle owner could potentially switch to a different manufacturer and replace that vehicle after it's been in a collision loss. There's other things that come into play here. The certified networks will become more relevant in establishing how those repairs are to be completed. And I think we need to take that into consideration with EV vehicles more so than we ever have with internal combustion engine technology.
Thanks, Pete. What do you see then as the future of collision repair networks?
It's interesting when I sit back and analyze over the years and watch the DRP movement from the 90s and into the 2000s and see how that movement has changed. And now we see the importance of certified repair networks with the OEs and what the implications of that are. It certainly brings one to conclude that the future of networks, collision repair networks, may just be as important to insurance companies as they are to the OEMs. It emphasizes the fact that there needs to be a level of collaboration and understanding between OEs and insurers that may not have existed to the point that it will need to with the EV revolution, Paul. This is very, very important that with the brain trust and the OE procedures being coordinated by the OEs and that information being translated back down to the certified networks and the importance of the certified networks adhering to those OE procedures, that everybody needs to be aligned in understanding what repairs are actually needed to restore that EV to its pre-loss condition. I don't know how much more I could add to that, but I really see that as key to what's going on here.
Okay, well, and that's a good segue then. My next question was regarding the importance of OEM repair procedures as it relates to the EV vehicle. And where do you see that going? I know that with NuGen you have a unique perspective on that. Where do you see the repair procedures evolving to in the future?
We've, as an industry, struggled delivering OEC or OE repair information, to shops in an efficient way. I don't personally believe you can expect a shop to spend anywhere from 20 minutes and up to 2 hours or maybe even longer gathering all the information that they need to repair that vehicle. What is really critical going forward is being able to have those procedures available before you touch the car, or even before possibly that you write an estimate. So what I'm saying here, it needs to be much more proactive from the standpoint of information being available real time as soon as that vehicle is delivered to the shop, before the blueprint is actually started to repair that vehicle. And we're looking at different ways now to deliver that information so a shop can understand what are the safety measures that need to be considered before I touch the car. And then after those safety measures are dealt with, now what are the correct procedures, I should say critical procedures, that I must take into consideration, knowing that we're dealing with the ADAS, knowing that we're dealing with high voltage scenarios, knowing that we're dealing with sensitive issues and what the importance could mean just to recalibrating when a mirror is removed and replaced. So in summary here, I can't emphasize enough to our audience that going forward, I just can't imagine how a collision repair shop cannot want to access the OEM repair procedures on every vehicle other than it may be a scratch and a fender. If it's a scratch and a fender and you have to R&I the headlight, then everything changes. Now you do need the OE procedures. So it's no longer a simple matter of anymore of just accessing OE procedures when you have structural damage. We just cannot continue down that path as an industry and have everybody aligned. And again, I want to go back to the fact that, you know, the OE procedures are so important here for the collision repair shop, but also the insurance company to understand what procedures need to be invoked here and dealt with so the shop can be remunerated for those procedures and dealt with in a fair and equitable way.
Thanks, Pete. What role do you see standards playing that perhaps they don't address today?
I don't think there's any misunderstanding of my position on standards, Paul. To the audience we have today, I'm incredibly passionate about standards. I don't think standards have gone far enough, and let me give you a little bit more information on that. Yeah, you know, when we started out with the EMS standard, it was great because we had a way of taking the data out of an estimate and importing it into a management system and then using that EMS and now BMS data in several different ways. But, you know, when we look at this and where I believe this is going from the standpoint of really refining and understanding what happened and how that vehicle was repaired is the repair order. So the repair order is the output of what actually took place. The estimate is the estimate, and it was a precursor. Supplements could be involved, but ultimately that repair order needs to have the data available to the different key stakeholders in the industry. And the key stakeholders go far beyond just the insurance company and the OEM and the collision shop. There are so many different entities that participate in this process now. For example, all of the companies that provide technology around pre-scan, post-scan, recalibration, how that information is actually accessed, ingested, and memorialized, and then played back to the industry for the greater benefit of everybody. We can't, as an industry, allow ourselves to monopolize that information by a few when it's absolutely essential for the good of the whole.
Thanks, Pete. So along that line, then, what opportunities and challenges do you see for different segments of the industry to work together to address these emerging needs?
Training is a huge issue. I'm concerned that with EVs coming forward, with autonomous vehicles playing along with EV and all the technology that's being built into these new vehicles, how are we going to get our technicians trained adequately to deal with them? And that needs to be a collaborative effort between the stakeholders in the industry to make that happen. We just can't rely on one or two stakeholders to ensure that the right information is going to be presented after the vehicle's in a loss and what repairs need to take place. That's number one. So I see that as an issue. The second opportunity that I also see as a challenge is the importance of the OEs and insurance companies working together. Now, John and Chris both touched on that topic and spoke to it. And I'm sitting back feeling exactly the same way. Well, we all well understand that the insurance community has been the market drivers as far as how the car gets repaired. I see a paradigm shift occurring with that the OEs need to have a greater stake and to protect their brand and ensure that we get the customer satisfaction that all parties are seeking. That's clearly a challenge and an opportunity for us as we move forward. We've got to get along and get together on how to repair these vehicles correctly.
Great, thanks, Pete. That's a very interesting perspective, and I agree. I think there's a lot of opportunity down that road. Well, Pete, that that completes our questions. So I'd like to open it up now to the audience to ask questions. So Stacy Phillips is our marketing director. Stacy, do we have any questions for the group?
Yes, we do. Thanks. Our first question is for John Ack. What is GM doing to handle end-of-life batteries for the new vehicle models?
That's a great question. And I think that we are working through some of those processes today. Clearly, as we look at our developing battery technology with our new Ultium battery, all of the processes relative to handling and disposition of that will need to be documented before those vehicles hit the road. And I've actually been engaged in several meetings, even one as of yesterday, where we were talking about some of those very issues and topics about the disposition of them and how they get handled at end of life or in a total loss environment that Chris mentioned, so that the entire industry is aware of the proper handling of those.
Thank you. For Chris Evans, is there an increase in loss severity due to additional mass inertia from EV weight distribution and or the cost of components and collateral damage that may not happen on internal combustion and hybrids?
Yeah, it's a great question, and we're still monitoring the severity numbers and frequency numbers. I would say anecdotally, because I don't have the data in front of me, the componentry and the sophistication of these vehicles, we are seeing an increase in severity based on some of that technology. As far as the mass of the vehicle and weight and things like that, I'm sorry, I can't really respond to that with authority. I simply don't know, but I can tell you that John had mentioned in his opening that we are seeing, albeit we're in the midst of COVID and that sort of thing, and it's affecting frequency and has affected frequency throughout 2020. But we are seeing a decrease in frequency and an increase in severity.
Thank you. And this question is for Pete. What are the largest obstacles to OE carrier collaboration on unifying the repair procedure ROI for both organizations? And Chris, if you would like to comment as well, but please go ahead, Pete.
I really appreciate when I read and hear about OEs and insurance companies working together and moving forward to try to realize and minimize the friction that has occurred over a lot of years. And I don't think there's any denying it. A lot of times people really don't want to speak about it, but I certainly don't have any problem addressing that issue. The EV revolution clearly has an opportunity to allow OEs and insurers to collaborate more like State Farm collaborates with GM. I think that's absolutely critical. The company that I work for, OEC, collaborates with State Farm. Those are the things that the relationships that need to be fostered here if everybody's going to succeed and win. We have to recognize that the collision, we're so dependent on the collision repairers to complete a quality repair. I think it's incumbent upon the manufacturers, the insurers, and the information providers to help facilitate that and then allow everybody to share that information and gain the benefit from that information that we all need to better manage our businesses. I hope I answered your question.
Thank you. Does anyone have anything to add?
I completely agree with Pete. I think very well said, Pete. And John mentioned it in the outset that, more so now than ever, it is critical that we are collaborative. We are working together. Like John and Pete, we won't give up any ages here, but we've all been around a little while in the industry, and I remember a day when, you know, OEMs were really not engaged in the industry. Well, times have changed, and as evidenced by John being here and others that you see on presentations like this and webinars and other meetings, which is a wonderful thing. And, you know, being more strategic and being more thoughtful and intentional about the collaboration. John and I talked the other day, and, you know, the word transparency, it comes up a lot these days, and we need to be more transparent if we're going to make progress. And so I think, you know, from my standpoint, you know, I feel like the OEMs have really come a long way in, you know, developing their collision repair protocols and methodology and certification networks and that sort of thing, which really should be applauded. I would say this, and John and I have had this conversation along with many other conversations I've had with other OE representatives, that you know, there's a lot of legacy information out there that has served the industry very well for a very long time. But I think as you consider the advent of, you know, the sophistication of, you know, technology and you know, componentry and communication networks and things like that, you know, I think there's an opportunity to kind of go back and look at some of the you know, legacy documentation that may exist in more general terms. I completely applaud, you know, John and other OEMs for putting together specific technical repair procedures to address, you know, specific repairs and step-by-step procedures. But there's a lot of legacy content out there that I think the industry would benefit from a reboot or a refresh from. Not to say it's bad, it's just, you know, with the advent of all of this technology, it's probably a good idea to kind of, you know, work together to improve some of that, to limit confusion and that sort of thing.
You know, earlier Chris mentioned in his backyard, Rivian acquiring the Mitsubishi plant and launching or actually producing their first vehicles now in June. And in speaking with Rivian Collision Repair Management, I have to admire them philosophically from the approach that they're taking. First of all, to have the collision repair information available on the very first day that they go into production, and the importance of that. They also recognize the importance of managing that information and making sure it's available to their repair network. And better yet, managing how the parts are going to be utilized in the repair process. And I really see them having a good global perspective on how to approach this as they step forward.
I'd like to add, and even maybe take it a step further, that I think I agree with what Pete and Chris have indicated. I think this is the opportunity in 2021 that, yes, we've had great discussions and we've started the collaboration, but Chris mentions, you know, legacy documents that we probably need to readdress and look at. And I'm working on several right now with our engineer and safety teams. But I think this is the year where we need to pull the stakeholders together in a very almost formalized manner to get people within the industry representing the stakeholders to sit down at a table on a regular basis to map out what these projects might look like and what are these issues that the carriers face and that the OEMs face. And I think it is about transparency and collaboration. And you know, the more we do this, and the more we identify these issues that have come up to me, we've solved for. We launched an ADAS document last year that helps repairers identify what these ADAS systems are called and how to be repaired, and all of that. That helps the carriers, that helps the repairers. We need to do the same thing on some of these legacy documents on inspection and whatnot that, you know, we have. But we need to come together as an industry to formalize this this task force to sit down as an industry and solve for BEV, and it'll trickle down and solve for some of the legacy issues. But the faster that we can do this, the quicker the market will be prepared, And look, I don't want the collision industry to be surprised when GM starts launching 10, 20, 30 different BEV vehicles. I don't want the repair or the insurance carriers to be surprised. We need to be able to be transparent and collaborate and look forward to what this new bold forefront or industry is going to look for on the horizon. Time's to do it. I'm ready to go. I'm ready to help the industry do that and pull my OEM peers. We've had this discussion. We've talked about it with carriers. We need a formalized process to be able to do that. So hopefully this is the year to do it.
Thank you to all three of you. We have a few more minutes and we have some general questions. The first is, do you see a decrease of both major and minor collisions as more EV vehicles are on the road?
I can jump in real quick. I know ADAS, whether it's EV or traditional ICE vehicle, I know with GM, with our ADAS equipment that we've been installing on vehicles over the last few years, we did a study. You can Google the results that we did a study with University of Michigan Transportation and Research Institute, UMTRI, I believe is how it's referred to, and it showed the decrease on vehicles based upon which combination of ADAS equipment was from a front end or a rear end or side impact, the technology that was added to the vehicle, what was the impact? And yes, there is a significant decrease in these accidents based upon the ADAS technology that the OEMs are putting on the vehicles.
Thank you. Pete, did you want to add, Pete or Chris?
There's still a lot of internal combustion engines in the North American fleet. And while I see that severity ratcheting down, I think it's going to take a long time before we see the full impact of what EV and autonomous brings to the table as far as insurability. I think everybody agrees that severity is going to be on the rise. There's just so much technology involved now compared to what used to be. Okay, this is no longer about fenders and paint. There's so much more to it. And I think our panelists would clearly agree with that. Okay, but we still have all these cars out there that people drive without any of these technology features, driver's assistance that are available. John, I'd like your feedback on that, and Chris as well.
Well, I'll just say real quick, I know we're up on time here. I completely agree with everything that John shared, and Pete, it's hard to argue with your points there. I would say just in short, a short answer to your question or to the last question was, we're seeing that show up in the data. I don't have, clear data right here I can cite to you, but we're seeing it show up in the data, the frequency.
Yeah, I would agree. Frequency being down, severity being an issue still. Frequency with the ADAS, regardless of whether it's ICE or BEV, it's been coming for a long time, and it's going to continue as individuals and consumers want more of this technology on their vehicles.
Thank you. Paul, it looks like we're up on the hour. So I do have a few more questions, but
well, we're at the top of the hour. First, let me thank Pete, Chris, and John for taking time to meet with us today. I think it was a very interesting conversation, and I do think, as John, I think he said very eloquently, this is a great time for the industry to work together. There are challenges that are emerging. And I think it's a great time for us all to see how we can work together to address them. So thank you all, gentlemen, for taking time to meet with us today.
You're welcome. Good to be here.
Thank you.
You bet. This is just a reminder that this is an AMI accreditation. There is a quiz that will be available for people seeking continuing education credits. You can go to AMI to take a test after this meeting to get your accreditation. The information will be available to you from an email you'll receive after this meeting. So thank you for that. Please follow CIECA on Facebook, LinkedIn, and Twitter. We will have another CIECAST February 25th, where we will be introducing the next generation of CIECA standards that we are beginning to develop, and we'll be sharing more information on the creation of those standards and seeking interested parties to join committees in the development of those standards. So with that, I thank you all very much for joining us today, and this concludes our webinar.